Let's talk about the disability industrial complex. What is it, and what does it mean to you? Well, the disability industrial complex is defined as a system where various entities, such as corporations, government agencies, not for profit organizations, and even healthcare providers, operate in ways that perpetuate and benefit from the marginalization and exploitation of people with disabilities. In other words, they keep their jobs and they keep making money as long as our needs are not met. If we ever got to a point where services provided, there was accessible, affordable housing and there were jobs that were available and we had the equipment and the needs that we needed, there would be a lot of people out of some jobs and not making big bucks to sit around and talk about what to do to help people with disabilities, and leave out people with disabilities within those conversations. That is the disability industrial complex. One of the easiest things to compare it to would be let's say in the States, the medical industrial complex, which is you pay money to go to hospitals. And then they turn around, they give you all kinds of medications. And what do those medications do? They make you sick, so you have to go back to the hospital. What do they not want to do? Help you get better, because if you're all better, guess what you're not going to do? You're not going to buy more of their medications. You're not going to go to the hospital. So they actually make a lot of money out of keeping people sick and obese, because that's how they do a lot of it. And they make a lot of money that way. And they count on it. So that is the disability industrial complex. Let's keep them in full need, people with disabilities. Let's take advantage of them and continue to marginalize them so that we can continue to make all kinds of money off that community. There are many government programs that will add to this, whether it's through income supports, disability supports, education, housing, healthcare, accessibility and employment legislation, or training and employment, because they tend to work with third-party service providers to provide these systems, and that builds up the disability industrial complex. And when it really got big was in the 80s, during the time in Canada, Prime Minister Mulroney, who started cutting the social service, cutting it back. So they cut back these jobs, but then they opened them up in outside third-party organizations who at some point realized the best way to keep some half-decent paying jobs was to provide a bit of service, but not full service. And that's what the disability industrial complex is. It's a problem because we are being kept marginalized for the benefit of others. This is a quote right from Miss Snow. She says, "Parents and people with disabilities, again with the best of intentions, step into the jaws of the service system and unintentionally relinquish their autonomy, their free will and choice, and accept the notion that others know best." So back in the 80s, they started things like getting rid of, really this deinstitutionalization and just sort of leaving people out there with nowhere to go. And then these groups formed to help start dealing with this and help creating this. But it's become part of the system. Another great example would be food banks. Food banks developed back in the 80s as part of, in the late 80s, when we saw a recession going on, and they developed as a short-term solution. But then they became part of this poverty industrial complex because now it gives people jobs. Now it is a way to fundraise, to do this, and it stays within the cycle. And the government relies on this organization to make it look like they're doing something when they're really not. It's all part of this fuzzy little circle, and you don't notice it unless you are the marginalized person in the middle of that complex. So, going forward, we need to demand for the end of the disability industrial complex. And how can we do that? We start demanding full autonomy and decisions over our choices. Tomorrow, we're going to discuss that in terms of things like as Kathy Snow calls it, the bowling or the Bolorama program. And we're going to talk about how that affects the DIC, why this is a problem, and why we need to demand for better and for change. So join me tomorrow and we'll talk about this some more.